Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for tuning in. Watch us here every Tuesday on LinkedIn Live at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have you ever wondered why women of color or diverse backgrounds get less support at work? A recent article in Harvard Business Review stated that women of color don't need to be told to lean in. Research shows that most of them have confidence, ambition, determination, and desire. What they don't always have is managers or leaders who understand how to help them overcome all the obstacles that stand in their way. According to a recent Nielsen survey, for example, 64% of Black women in the United States agree their goal is to make it to the top of their profession. That's nearly double the percentage of non Hispanic white women with the same goal. McKinsey and leanin.org, meanwhile, reported that 83% of Asian women, 80% of Black women, 76% of Latinas say they want to be promoted, compared to 75% of men and 68% of white women in the study. And yet, despite representing about 18% of the population, women of color only represented 4% of the C-suite level positions in 2018, falling far below white men, which is 68%, and white women, which is at 19%. Even graduating from a prestigious business or law school doesn't help much. Of the 532 African American women who earned their MBAs at Harvard Business Schools between 1977 and 2015, only 13% have achieved the highest ranking executive positions. You might also be wondering what this has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. That story illustrates that the factors preventing women of color from advancing at work are quite different from those holding white women and even men of color back. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate. And for a living, I help thought-provoking leaders implement DEI plans in their workplace. And if you tune in, not only will you have better insight of our experiences, it will allow room for self-reflection. In our previous episode, we shared how we code switched and what it did and how it affected or helped us. My personal share is that double standards, microaggressions, and unconscious biases existed throughout my entire career in the workplace. To name a few, a 2006 survey of employees of 5 large US companies found that women of color are most likely to experience workplace harassment among all groups. They are often held to a much higher standard than their white and male peers and presumed to be less qualified despite their credentials, work product, or business result. So my question to you is, what happened? Sahar, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you
Sahar
for having
Akil,
me.
you're welcome. Sahar Akil has 15 years experience in sales and marketing with a focus on consumer packaged goods industry. Previously, she worked for Fortune 500 companies like UPS and L'Oreal. She has not stopped there. While packing a punch, she is currently working as an e-commerce national sales manager at an international furniture company. Her main focus right now is advocating for women in the workplace. Sahar, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. So, in my opinion, where a lot of the time the ball drops, it's not particularly almost at recruitment, but always at a level after, where women of color especially do need
Mhm.
support. A lot of the times we're not shown the mentorship or availabilities in the boys club as we so like. For an example, I used to work for another company of mine, and they used to have a hockey boys league at Loblaws for with all their buyers and other associates, where that's not somewhere I would be welcomed. So those relationships that they were building outside of the workplace and outside the office, usually women of color are not welcomed or even looked at participating. So I think that's one of the barriers when it comes to just overall business wise, but also in terms of HR, where they don't really support their employees after they've been hired. They don't necessarily have any progress reports directly with their employees. It's usually whatever the manager says. It's the manager's word is over yours, and so when there's that lack of disconnect where, okay, well, this is where I see myself, and even though if your manager's not supporting you or even if they are, the HR doesn't have a clear mindset of where you could be or your potential. So oftentimes when there is a promotion available, you're often looked over because you're also not discussed. So that's been some of my experience from it.
Right. I see Valerie shaking her head. So I'm going to introduce Valerie to the panel. She has earned her credentials with a bachelor's degree in English and MBA from FIU. She has never stopped. Today, she runs an airtight e commerce automation business. Valerie, welcome.
Thank you for that incredible introduction.
You're
You've become
welcome.
so known for it, and I just couldn't wait to hear what you were going to say for about me. But yeah, I can totally relate to everything that Sahar that Sahar said, because that's been my experience. In a previous position, I was brought in for one thing, and that's what I understood the role to be. And then when the position started, it was something completely different, utilizing sophisticated tools, software that I had never been introduced to, I had never been trained for, that I knew nothing about. And when I asked for training, I was told, well, you weren't hired, to be trained. You were hired for your brain. So, I mean, automatically that sets me up, and I would set anyone up for failure, right? Because immediately the implication is if you can't figure it out, you're dumb, right? So there's that. And the other implication is I'm not supporting you. With that's very clear. So now the pressure becomes, you having to take on these responsibilities with no direction and having to figure out your role by yourself, which sets you up for failure. So I can absolutely, relate to Sahar and, and what she said in her experience. And, to add to that, when you're in a very cutthroat environment where you're dealing with, other employees who feel, not supported and they feel scared, you create an extremely toxic environment where, there's no unity and there's no support for any help. So, yeah, I've been there, and it's very troubling. It's very troubling.
You know, it's Oh, Valerie, we can't hear you.
Uh, she's not talking.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
I basically just ended that thought saying that I can relate to everything that Sahar just discussed.
right. And, it's interesting because there is, it seems like there's an underlying motive to set us up for failure. Is that what you felt, Sahar?
Almost, just because they like to have us in their numbers, that we look good for diversity. However, when it comes to actual promotion or actually seeing somebody in a decision making seat, they would rather have someone similar to them. So, someone similar to their background, which happened to be another Caucasian male that they can relate to. Even though you might have, more than impressionable females or a female of color, available for that position. One of my other experiences have been is that when you're going into a company um, that is supposed to be woman dominated, they still look at you as just a number. And they preach diversity. However, when you're looking at the overall structure of the company, the higher level execs are all men, even though they claim to only have certain percentage of males, and it's mostly female dominated. That might be true, but all those positions that are female dominated or are given to the women of color are lower level positions or positions that have no future. So a lot of the times when after you hit a certain peak, you're no longer welcomed in those higher level positions. Um, that's what I've found. I've also asked, a lot of companies to be transparent regarding their C-level execs. And it's unfortunate when they discuss their entire company across the board and the diversity structures or percentages within them, but they don't actually look at the actual diversity within the C level, actual diversity between the mid manager level, and then within the laborers who are often type women of color and immigrants or anyone that they think that could be paid less and will not complain about it. A lot of these times, these companies just make you feel like, oh, you should be lucky just to be here. And
Yeah,
when you look around, you know,
absolutely.
you kind of really be like, maybe I should be, because there's no one else that looks like me. My manager doesn't look like me. Anywhere on the C-level exec doesn't look like me. But how a company gets away with that is when they publish their diversity report, they include every level, including distribution warehouse, where, uh, by statistics, sorry, I can't say that, it's usually, people of color more so than when you're looking at a head office in a downtown like New York City, Toronto, Montreal. A lot of the higher level execs are Caucasian and specifically male.
So,
Yeah.
excuse me. So, what I gather is that in the C suite level positions, there is not enough diversity or representation
Mhm,
to be able to put forth even a plan or something to help someone of color who's coming into that position.
mhm. And a lot of the time, a
Correct.
lot of the
That's.
time,
I'm
go
sorry. Go
ahead,
on, Sahar.
Valerie. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I absolutely think, I mean, at least in my experiences, and I know, some friends that I have in corporate and everything who are also women of color. I mean, it's absolutely deliberate, and it's so obvious. In a prior position, I've seen, women being groomed for the next position. They have succession planning for them. But how come that isn't the case for my position? How come that hasn't been the case for my Latina colleagues' position? Why is that not, the norm for everyone? So it absolutely does set us up for failure when we're not being seen. We're certainly not being heard. And, there's really no plan to help us get to the next level. So I mean, it's absolutely deliberate, and it's, at least in the prior company that I was in, it was very obvious. When you looked at the C-suite executives, no one looked like me. No
Yeah.
one looked like any of us here, or even at a director level, quite frankly. Um, and it's it's triggering, and it's debilitating. It really is debilitating, and you almost feel like a target, because you have to, you feel compelled to try and do more and prove yourself, and but it just falls on deaf ears because there's no plan for you. There's no plan for you. So
Right. And you said that when you said there's no plan for you and you feel like everything, you feel targeted, did you feel that you had to put in more
mhm.
hours and do more work than the average person to continuously prove yourself?
Oh,
I
absolutely, absolutely.
Valerie?
But
Yeah.
now go on, Sar. I'll finish up after you.
Absolutely. I felt like that. I think Valerie agrees with me as well. A lot of the times, I used to say this to my previous manager because I saw the clear, um, succession level that my male colleagues had that I didn't, even though when you're looking at the job position and the KPIs, I was able to prove by numbers that I was better at doing my job. Yet there was no plan that was offered to me. HR wasn't, even talking to me at that point, and it was something that I thought was told that was my problem, that I needed to stand out more. So on top of uh, my 60 hours a week that I was already working, I took additional online trainings. I used to do other people's work to get that experience, where to a point that I just ended up burning myself out. And coming back into the company, there was still no succession plan for me after I'd been here for however many years, and I was the most senior. Yet I still had to prove myself to get to the next level. Where I was seeing these young, right out of university, colleagues of mine just kind of breeze through these positions where I'm like, hey, I'm here too. Nothing was ever done about it. So
Mhm.
I definitely can relate to Valerie's experience.
And
Well, at least you had KPIs. I didn't even have that. It was just that the managers, whim, whatever, my review. And I've got to
can,
tell you, I mean, it was
can you repeat
incredibly
that? Can you repeat
discouraging.
that about the review? It was frozen.
Oh, I was just saying that at least, Sahar had KPIs. In my experience, it was, however the manager felt about me at that time. That's what would be reflected in my reviews. And it's very discouraging. It makes you feel helpless and extremely fearful, because you don't know what's behind the door, right? You don't know what to work towards. You don't know what is expected of you. And to be in a position like that is really crippling, because it gives you no power. It gives you no power. It completely takes your power away.
Um, I would just like to add that the KPIs apparently changed at my year-end review that no one told me about or communicated to me. So all the KPIs that I worked 60 hours for, apparently I didn't hit my
But for
KPI.
not.
But I wasn't told that I was not doing a good job or that I didn't do the job that they were looking for. I was just told that I was doing an excellent job at what I was
Along the
doing.
way.
And
Yep.
one of the things that really gets me the most is that they say that it's a mid-year or year-end review, yet managers already come um, prepared to what they think of you, what your rating was, what your bonus should be, and kind of the next steps, whether you hit your target or not, regardless of what you're presenting to them. So even with the KPIs that I was able to present in numbers, they were still like, oh, well, we've reviewed you already, and this is what we think of you, and that's it. So there isn't any sort of discussion to be had. It's just you're told what they think of you. I'm not sure if you've had that experience, Valerie, where you're going into a review or mid-year review or end-year
Yeah,
review,
absolutely,
thinking it's more of a
absolutely.
discussion, where it's not. It's absolutely not, and it's very disheartening.
For our audience, can you explain to everybody what a KPI
Yeah.
is?
So a KPI is a key performance indicator. That could be anything from, hey, from a sales manager, hey, you have to hit a certain percentage of sales within this year. For a marketing person, it could be like, well, you need to launch these many products or have strategized this, strategize a development of this product within the next year. So it's different kind of things that you're looked at, that determines if you're actually hitting your target at the end of the year.
Okay. And so you were never told along the way
Yeah, it's
what
kind of like
target?
a goal.
s- It's a goal, you said, Valerie?
No.
It's not a goal.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a goal. It is a goal. So KPIs are basically just indicators of different performance goals. That could be for a marketing campaign. That could be, in your own personal performance. There, it's different. So it's just a key performance indicator.
Mhm.
So throughout the year, there's no, well, there's no plan, there's no performance, there's no, you know, indicator to look
Feedback.
at. And then, you go to there's no feedback. There you go. You go to a review and you're blindsided by, these things that you didn't do or that you were supposed to do. Or I mean, it's like quicksand. You're just never able to really get out from under the pile. You're never really able to hit anything. And I honestly think that that's done. I think that it's done. Uh, it's hard to say if it's done on purpose, but I think there are multiple factors. I think that it's poor leadership, and yeah, it's poor leadership. It's essentially poor leadership. That's what it boils down to, which starts at the top. And I think, if I were to go back to a corporate position, which I'm not ever, but you know, if something drastic happened and I had to, the first thing I would do is look at the C-level executives and just start to look at everyone. To I think that starts to give you an idea, and their background. It starts to give you an idea of the culture of the company that you're walking into. If you don't see anybody that looks like you, it might be a tough road ahead.
Right.
Um, One of the issues that I do want to bring up is that companies are really good at marketing, that they are diverse, where it's a different
Mhm.
thing behind the scenes and it's a different things, especially at the C levels. A lot of international companies, especially where they are based in Europe, especially France, a lot of the C levels, managerial levels, even internationally, are also Caucasian male and that speak French. So they, in a worldwide organization, you're kind of seen as, well, I'm never gonna get anywhere, with this organization, because there's never anyone that looks like me, anyone that's promoted or done an international assignment is always male or French. So even me being a Anglophone speaker in Montreal, I've experienced so many opportunities lost because a French speaking colleague of mine was seen as a higher value, even if I had more experience or if I was able to do a better job, because they saw them as, well, they're going to go grow with the company, and they match more of what our C-level execs look like, and their language and also their culture.
It's interesting. I heard you say early on that, it led to a burnout. I've been burnt out. And so I know what it feels like. When you talk about being burnt out, it's interesting. I read an article in Harvard or New York Times, one of the two. And I think I had mentioned it to Valerie. And the being born with our skin, within our skin, already has a level of anxiety attached to it because of how we need to come in to a simple level position. There are so many layers attached to being a woman of color. You could be parent, son or daughter of immigrants. There's so many layers there that I think burnouts precipitate the fact that it's all of that before we actually get to the workplace. So when you said you had a burnout, what was your process, Sahar? What was it that, you know, we know what it was, but what was your process like?
Um, so my burnout happened. I think this might be triggering for a lot of people of color, so I'm just going to say that. But it definitely happened around George Floyd's death. Um, it wasn't the death itself, but it was actually his daughter who stood up and said, in a court where I just don't understand why I'm being treated differently just because of the color of my skin. And as a woman of color who was in Chicago when 9/11 happened, as a Muslim, like I know what that feels like, where I had no control over worldly situations, yet I was at a young age looked at as a target and extremely bullied um, with racist remarks just because of the color of my skin as a child by adults. So I could definitely see the pain in her eyes when she said that. And it really humbled me when looking into, um, wow, okay, well, I'm in this position of change. There's no one else in my company that looks like me. I'm the one that has to speak up about these issues within the company to make it better for someone else to come in, or else who else will? It's so easy for even women in position or women in power to speak just because they're going to be looked at in a negative light. They're worried about their future, their jobs, and I'm grateful enough to be able to speak up about what was going wrong, ask our HR for actual plans or policy change within the company because I saw that the company was not as diverse as their ads were. Um, and that initially, because I was already working 60 hours, this happened, trying to get some change done. No promotion after however long that was promised to me. I had been gaslighted. I was being harassed. It was all of it together that led me to my burnout. Um, Something that I thought that I would never be in, to be honest. I was like, this could never happen to me because I've always been an overachiever. Um, but it is definitely real. I remember the doctor telling me, it's like, you're having a burnout. And I just remember just crying just because I'm like, I think you got this wrong. Like, I can't be this, this can't be happening to me. She's like, yeah, you're burning out. You need a break. And unfortunately, I had two at the same company. And after the second one, it was definitely time for me to look at different options. But I didn't have any because I was fired for speaking up, for everything that was going on, that I was being harassed for, speaking up against microaggressions, speaking up against, falsely claiming diversity, and so many different issues. And I honestly don't regret it. I say it proudly. And yeah, that was a bit of my experience for my burnout.
You know, you mentioned you were gaslit. Can you give us an example?
Well, for an example, when I took this promotion, I mean, this was my second position with. I'm just going to say the company. It was with L'Oreal. It was my second position with L'Oreal, where they told me that I'd be promoted within the year just because I had so much more experience within the industry, within everything that I've done previously. They're like, don't worry, you're going to take this position. Even though I wasn't gaining anything from it, from my CV, I took it to be a team player. And they told me that I just need to do it before I could move on. And in my year-end review, they basically said that that was never promised to me. No one knows what I'm talking about. I didn't hit any of my KPIs where I brought them with numbers like, hey, this is actually how much of a difference I made within my position, how much sales increases you've had. There's not a lot of damage. I was able to decrease our excess inventory. I'm able to, forecast better, literally with the numbers. And they're like, well, this isn't good enough. Your colleague did this something else. And I was like, well, I wasn't told to compare myself to a male colleague because my position in itself was so overwhelming than his. Just to give an example, I managed, um, so the entire luxury um, brands combined, they manage just around over 100 projects per year. I, on my desk alone, manage over 300 projects. So just that in its volume compared to anyone else in my position was very different. And they said it didn't matter, where I was told something else before. So the changing of the KPIs, gaslighting as to what I was told before, and I became so. I started having anxiety. Like now, I have severe anxiety because of L'Oreal that I have to be on medication for. And it was that anxiety of, well, like, what if they're going to change their mind? Are they telling me the truth? In every single meeting, I was just paranoid always because I didn't know if they were going to tell the truth, if they were going to change their mind, what they're going to say at the next meeting. I literally always had to make sure that I'm following up with an email, recording my meetings. I asked, if there's a woman of color manager available that could actually come into a meeting with me with my managers, and they said there wasn't. Obviously, they were all Caucasians, and as much as the managers might be biased and racist, it's a company-wide issue because the HR managers and all of HR is also Caucasian. And whose side are they going to take? Like a little brown girl, or someone that they know that they're going to promote after, and that will stay within their company for years and years end. So
Valerie, I see you shaking your head. Do you have anything to add?
Sounds very similar to it sounds very similar to my experience, especially the gaslighting. And there's so many terms that I really didn't know or understand that I was feeling until I started watching your show. But the imposter syndrome, constantly being told, well, we're not sure, we're just not sure what you do here. Meanwhile, I've got, we have monthly meetings, I have lists of projects. People are, constantly being updated with what I'm doing, having meetings and going over my projects, but yet, well, we just don't understand what you do. So then when I was able to show what I'm doing, the next thing was, well, you don't bring any new ideas. So, I just started to realize that it was just a matter of time before they would find some reason to lay me off or fire me or what have you. I was eventually laid off, but the burnout was constant. The burnout was from day one. But in South Florida, at least, the job market here is very tough. I wasn't able to just go and find another position. I gave birth at the time I was working for this company as well. I mean, it's not just easy to just pick up and find another position. It was very difficult. And plus, they kind of get you with what you call the golden handcuffs. You've got stock options, you've got, a lot of things tied into this company. So you can't just pick up and leave. You have to be very strategic about it. But the burnout was constant. I got shingles twice in a year and a half, which is unheard of for a young person. I was constantly, having to get shots of B12 to be able to manage my anxiety, in addition to taking it orally. And it was just constant nerves, driving into the office every day was just a nightmare. I really had to, pump myself up psychologically, listen to a lot of motivational speakers and really get my emotions in check so I could go there and play the role and deal with the gaslighting, the, feeling like I'm not, I don't belong there. And, just all of the other, incredibly insulting and demeaning and, toxic things that I had to deal with in that environment. It's extremely debilitating. And not feeling like I could go anywhere and, express my concerns or express my grievances. I would, in retrospect, I would definitely say it was a form of harassment, but I never felt like I could go to HR and say anything because the people who are doing the harassing are hanging out together, with the VP of HR. So what am I going to say? And I really didn't even put a lot of these things together. I just knew that I was happy to be out of there, that I was starting to feel like myself, like my confident self again. And obviously, I started to put together like some implicit biases and some, perhaps that there was some racial component to it. But like Sahar, it really wasn't until George Floyd happened and so many conversations, started to happen around how people of color feel and are treated that it all came crashing down for me. It really all came crashing down. And, I just realized at that point how much I had endured, how much I had to deal with and constantly have to deal with. I no longer intend to deal with those things in a corporate, certainly not in a corporate environment, but, you know, it's a lot. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. It
You
was
know,
even kind of strange for me to even admit these things to myself. Like, wow, there's racial component to what's happening. Coming from a West Indian background, I at least a Haitian background, Haitian American. I'm Haitian American. Um, we don't really, at least in my home, and I know most Haitian homes, you don't. There's not like the race component. It's usually like the class component. So I don't really. That never really resonated so much with me until I really started to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I kind of feel naive now, looking back then, but it was it was a rude awakening. Let's just put it that way.
yeah, I think that's why so many countries and nations were in an uproar when he was murdered. I still haven't ever watched the trial or the actual video. And knowing, yeah, and knowing what I know now, like you said, Valerie, it was that's what it was. You know, be and realizing how much racism I had really suffered over the last 25 years. And like you, because of these shows, there's a lot of research I'm doing in the background, and some of these terms, like you, came to me, and I thought, there is an actual word to what I was feeling, that I wasn't alone in feeling that. And then when you're
Yeah,
expressing, your pain and exactly what's happening to HR, and it usually falls on deaf ears. Yeah,
right.
right. It usually
I mean,
falls.
there were so many realizations that were so angering and triggering. I remember at the time an article was released about women of color, African American women in particular, are, I can't remember the exact number right now, but we're more likely to die in childbirth because our pain perception is perceived to be higher. So, when we need, care or, what have you, it's not taken as seriously because our pain tolerance is considered to be higher. And I remember being 7 months pregnant and, waking up with a lot of pain, not realizing what was going on, calling my manager to tell her, hey, I think I'm going to go to the doctor because I'm having this pain, and being told, oh no, it's nothing. It's not a big deal. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I'm sure it's because you just need to stretch and exercise more. It's not that big of a deal. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Luckily, I didn't listen to her and actually went to the doctor. And oh, guess what? I had a raging infection and I was in labor. So I had to go to the emergency room right away. So imagine if I had spent a couple of hours in traffic trying to get to an office when I was actually in labor. It was actually quite serious, So I think of moments like that, and I thought of those moments, and it's just so triggering. It really angered me. And I didn't think of it at the time. I was annoyed. But in retrospect, thinking of it now and thinking about those implicit biases and, the lack of empathy, the real lack of empathy is very upsetting. It's very upsetting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
And George Floyd just was over the top for me.
Oh, absolutely.
That was
I
over the
think
top
it,
for me,
yeah.
especially having a son. That was over the top for me.
Which is another trigger.
Yeah.
So
It is a
Sahar,
trigger.
what? Yeah,
It is a
it
trigger.
is.
Just thinking of it, and I'm not, an emotional person, but I get teary.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Mm,
I'm sorry that
Yeah.
that unfortunately that we still have to talk about it, because I think people that aren't triggered by it, they don't realize how much emotion goes behind all of that. I think people that are just, oh well, unfortunately that happened, they don't realize like how triggering it was for everyone that had experienced racism literally almost every single day of their lives, or we're still living with it, and how painful it was for us to watch that, that could be somebody I knew, that could be my brother, that could be my son, that little girl could be my daughter, that little girl could have been me. I think there's no sense of empathy behind that. They're just like, oh well, it has been going on, can we move on now because we have targets to meet?
literally.
Right. Well, I have to say I'm happy I was not in corporate at that time, because I don't know what would have happened had I had been in an office, that office in particular, dealing with what I was dealing with and having to witness something like that. But it certainly brought back very bad memories, very bad memories, very bad memories of what I had to endure. And, I felt, and I still feel like it's important to talk about these things, and to have an open dialogue about it, to hopefully inspire businesses to do better, do better. I had shared an article recently with Rochelle, and I was so excited. I'm like, oh wow, look, companies are hiring more graduates from Black colleges. I mean, it's incredible. And then Rochelle brought up a good point and said, yes, but how are they treated when they get there? And I'm like, oh God. Oh God. It's true. Right? I mean, it's one thing to get the job, but how are you going to feel when you get there? And it's the little things that touch the subconscious that indicate to you that you need to be quiet, that your voice doesn't matter. And I remembered this one little thing, and it seems little. It's obvious. It's, when I tell you the story, you'll see that it's a big thing. But I remember feeling uncomfortable, but I realize now why I was so uncomfortable with what happened. On the floor that I worked on, I was one of 3 African American women. And there was a VP there, a man, of course, who would, not of color, who would walk around the office, and it was always very loud and, and obnoxious and joking with everyone. everybody, but very loud, very, very loud. And this was a common thing that he would do. And then there was a one day, an African, one of the girls, one of the women of color, she laughed about something, and it was a little bit too loud, and she just laughed. A VP from another office came storming out of her office and went to her supervisor and said, "You really need to talk to, such and such, because this is not the kind of company that we have here. She's being very loud." And all she did was laugh. Meanwhile, this guy walks around, he speaks at the top of his lungs, always, but he's okay. Everybody just laughs at what he says. This woman happens to laugh a little bit too loud, and she gets reprimanded. And those little things touch the subconscious. So what can other people of color expect at this place? It's just, yeah, it's unacceptable.
I agree. Sahar, so how are you doing now?
I'm doing better. I'm still trying to find my way. I feel like I needed to think of my job as less of a career than of a paycheck. And I think once I have that mentality change where, hey, this isn't where I should be spending my best hours. This isn't where my family is or people that I love are, or, the value that I want to give back to society is. This is just a job where I'm making an income that I could pay my bills with. And then outside of that, I do other things like this show. And, on my Instagram, I talk a lot about politics and, daily issues and what women are dealing with, or even like I talk a lot about mental health issues, and those are something that gives me light, that gives me energy. And that's how I'm trying to get better, by giving more energy and more light to things that are better, that make me feel better, instead of getting drained by a position that I might not necessarily see myself, but I still need to have. Mind you, I only took this position because I had a manager who was a woman of color, and two, because I did see diversity in the team. So going back into the labor force, I still had a certain amount of standards of where I wanted to be. So I would never feel like how I felt at L'Oreal, which was just toxic, terrible, not recommended.
Right. And next steps? Do you have next steps in your career?
For me, next steps would be just, honestly, I still feel young. I still feel like there's a lot that I can learn. I'm looking for mentors. I wanted a woman of color mentor, so I'm looking for that. I want to write a book one day. I want to do more speaker events, and at the end of my day, I just want to help other people. Like I want to help women. I want to help children. I just want to show that they are so special, that I want to make them feel like how I never felt, and I want to make them feel special. So regardless of what I'm doing, that's the goal for me at the end of the day, to make others, feel valued.
Of course. It's important to be, like Valerie was saying, it's important for us to have these conversations, to be able to impart, so that it's actually very cathartic to do these shows and to talk about it, because it takes bravery and courageousness, and you don't feel like you're alone. So I'm happy you're doing this, because we need more people to come out and speak about it more often, so that they can have a balance in their mental health. Going back to mental health, that's a big issue that's just not spoken about, because and Valerie can probably contest, it's secrets that are well kept in the Caribbean family household. It's not something to talk about, it's not something to share, but we live it. We live it.
Mhm.
So, Sahar, what would you do in hindsight?
Um, I believe that for me, I don't regret speaking up. I don't regret, um, making my HR or my manager sweat a little when they receive an email of mine regarding the racism or microaggressions or gaslighting that still exists at L'Oreal. I had no problem speaking about it publicly because I knew that I wasn't in the wrong, and also I was blessed enough to be really good at my job where they could not talk about my work at all. They could not speak on my um, work or how I treated other people. They could only make false claims. Um, and I think in hindsight, I should have documented better. I think just keeping a document of when you're having conversations with your HR and managers, always send, hey, a recap documents. These are the minutes. This is what we've talked about. This is what we've discussed. So always have that. Also, if you're having an issue within a company, yes, speak with HR. Always mention your problems in emails, not just face to face. So that's what I've learned. And also, if you really feel like you're getting, if you're treating badly, it's easier for you to file a complaint while you're working there to the labor board than it is after. That's something I've learned. Those are just some tips that I wish I knew or I would share with other people to, be vocal because you're there while so many others aren't. And in order to create a space for more of us, more women of color, we have to um, be vocal about issues that do harm us. And I really hope that I created just even a little bit of better environment for somebody else that came after me. And that was my hope all along.
And Valerie, what would you do in hindsight?
Um, in
I know you
hindsight, I
mentioned it
think,
earlier. Hmm.
yeah, I think in hindsight, I probably would just not have taken the position at all. Um, that's my first, that's my, that's my emotional response. But, I think in hindsight, I would have fought a little more. I would have documented more. I wouldn't have relied on people or my manager who I thought, had my back. I wouldn't have relied on her to protect me. I think that we have to be very careful with that. It's always you against the world in corporate. You can't rely on anyone to protect you or to even really educate you. So I think that I would have, yeah, I would have made an effort to protect myself more.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
Protect
think as
myself
an
more and
employee,
be more vocal. Yeah.
yeah. I think just as an employee, I've just learned that HR is not there for the employees. They're there for the managers. So make sure you know your rights. You've
They're there to
read,
protect the company.
yeah, they're there to protect the company and the managers. So if you do actually have an issue with your manager, make sure it's in writing. And if you need to contact the labor board, do so. Yes, you can make two complaints at once. You can make a complaint with your company and you can make a complaint with your labor board just to make sure that things are actually being done. Because I did make a complaint within my company, um, but
Yeah.
it was literally gaslighting. Um, I had, the person that I made a complaint against was the same person to fire me, and to talk about the report that um, with all the issues that I had to deal with. I'm like, isn't this a direct conflict of interest? Like, I literally had to ask them to bring someone from legal because I'm like, this is a direct conflict of interest. You're going to talk about the report that I complained against you for. Like, it didn't make sense. So companies don't care about you. That's what I've learned. It is there, like they're there to protect themselves. If you really do need things done, make sure it's always
Yeah.
in writing. in an email. You keep a record of, even if they don't want the meetings recorded, you keep meeting minutes that are sent immediately after, and contact the labor board because they're there to help you way more than your HR ever is. And I've had similar experience where I thought a manager had my back where she didn't. Um, she literally said, I think this was the trigger where this was definitely the trigger that I had my burnout for. It's just my manager was, this is the last thing she said to me was, I understand how you feel. She was a Caucasian woman. She's like, I know how you feel as a woman of color. I've had women of color friends while growing up. I'm like, so how does that compare to what I'm going through right now? I was like you're clearly not understanding what I'm putting forth, or this conversation
Red
is not
flag.
going. And I think that was it for me, where I was so overworked, I was so over everything, and I just remember like I can't do this anymore, and just that was it.
And is there
Yeah.
anything you could have done differently? Do you think, that probably goes back, what would you do in hindsight? But is there anything that you would add to that or do that you would do differently?
I think for Valerie's position, like I would also not take the position, especially when I knew that I was already overqualified for it. I think once they have you in the position, they keep you there, um, because I was really good at my job. Like they had a harder job replacing me, with someone equally at my level. So they kept me there as long as I could be there before they fired me. So I would definitely not take a job that you feel overqualified for, and negotiate and know your worth. I think that's one of the things coming out of L'Oreal where I just had to learn, where I really had, going into any position forward or any situation, I know my worth and I know how to negotiate. And if a company or if somebody doesn't see it, then you I'm sorry, then I'm too good for you. My time is precious, and I'd rather be somewhere else where I'm valued more.
Absolutely. Would you agree with that, Valerie?
Absolutely. And it's funny, growing up, you hear your parents say things. My mother made me crazy. I'm sure you guys have similar experiences. But, as I got older, I realized that she really had so many valuable little tidbits of information that I didn't realize I was going to need until I got much older. But one of the things that she always said was make sure you understand the position that you're accepting. Get a job description. Get a job. And she said, get it.
Oh,
Had I had that, that would have given me, a better idea of what I was signing up for. And then,
right.
if things changed along the way, then asking for training, saying, okay, well, this is not part of my job description, and asking for training. So, I definitely think that that's very important as well, to really understand the position and really know what you're getting into, and not this bait and switch thing. Like, oh yeah, come and take the job. And oh, guess what? Surprise. We're throwing it. Shouldn't be acceptable, but when you're in the workforce and obviously you need a job, you just kind of take it, you
Right.
kind of take it. And I think that I wish I had more confidence at the time to say, hey, this is not what I understood the position to be. Let's discuss this.
Right. This has been a really in-depth conversation. We have, you know, probably less than a few minutes left together on the show right now, but I definitely want to say thank you to the both of you, to Sahar for sharing. And it's, again, I always say it on LinkedIn and on Instagram, we have to be brave enough to have these conversations. We have to bring others to be able to have the conversation so they can realize what is actually going on. And again, it comes down to our confidence and our self-worth and being vocal and documenting and taking minutes, like Sahar was saying, and knowing the job description, like Valerie mentioned, and really knowing who the key leaders are. And if there's no representation, then, like Valerie said, it could be very difficult. It could be an uphill battle. So, my keynote is that while I tried to limit my own
Yeah.
bias as much as possible by interviewing only women whom I did not know and sticking to the same set of questions for ongoing interviews, it was impossible to completely remove my own personal experience from this discussion. Without it, I would have not been able to undertake it in the first place. So, the continual theme surfaced that if true equality in the workplace is what we are after, then sooner or later we will have to tackle the issues that are distinctive to us. And especially in the workplace, we need to recognize we're not alone. I know many of you are having transparent conversations, dialogues with the people around you, and trying to figure out with how you feel about all of this. You must ponder that change starts with us. How you resolve those questions will be distinctive to you as women of color and of diverse backgrounds. This will reflect your personal and professional experiences through your own community and workspace. What is essential is that you answer those questions. Today, we uncovered the results of women of color receiving less support at the workplace. Please go through the process, reflect what we've been talking about. What's crucial is that you go through the process. And while enough of us can do just that, over time, we will continue having a united front. Transparency and authenticity is the key. We need to be true to ourselves. We can fundamentally create that transformation. Take your drawbacks, turn it around into something others can find valuable. Give yourselves grace. I know Valerie and I talk about this all the time. We have to give ourselves grace.
Grace. Grace. Yeah.
We must continue having these courageous conversations about DEI. Where these dialogues will take us, we don't know. At least we're here to help and to share. Thank you again for listening. Follow me on LinkedIn, share your comments and your feedback. This has been an epic moment, and there is more to come. Sneak peek. Next month, we will have full-fledged details into Sahar's negative corporate experience. Again, I want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
been fun.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you for the
so.
opportunity.
Yeah, thank
Oh,
you.
you're welcome. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.